Hello and welcome to another episode of the Diet Obsessed podcast. I am your host, Veronica Santarelli. I am a certified personal trainer, nutrition and weight loss coach, and this podcast is for those of us who are just obsessed with everything related to improving health and longevity, with a special emphasis on food, fitness, and diet culture. All right, let's get into the show. Now, first, if you want to support the show, there's a few ways you can do that. So this is one of my free episodes. I do 2 free episodes every other week. And then every other week I do 2 premium content shows that you can subscribe to. So I do one called Craving More. That one you can subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, on Patreon, on Spotify. The other one is a VIP tier that's only accessible on Patreon. So I do one of those a month and then another one for Craving More. So those are how you can get some extra content, extra juicy, extra personal, extra controversial. I usually save those topics for behind the paywall. And then there are also some ways that don't cost a dime. So if you're looking and watching this on YouTube, you can click that subscribe button. That doesn't cost a dime, but it does make sure that you get these episodes every time they come out, and it really helps support the show. You can leave a rating or review if you just listen to the show. You can leave a rating or review, especially is helpful on iTunes. So those are a couple ways. You can follow me at the Diet Obsessed podcast. I love hearing from all of you when you message me. All right, well, let's get into the show, and I appreciate your support. All right, everyone. So welcome back to another show. I have a really good podcast review coming up at the end from Burnt Toast. But let's jump right into my personal segments. So we'll get right into my mental health check-in. So today was the first week of my new schedule. Well, this week is my new schedule finally. And so I actually have time. I have some of my time back. It's amazing. So today, for example, so what I've done is I now have a schedule for my regular full-time job where I start at 1:15 in the afternoon and I work till 9:45 at night. And then all my personal training clients, I've moved to just Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So that way, Tuesday and Thursday and Friday, I don't have to get up at 4 a.m. anymore. I can sleep in a little bit. Like today I slept until like 7:30. It was amazing. I was like, oh my God, I could get up. I could be leisurely. I sat outside and it was raining outside and it was cool. And I just sat out with my cup of coffee, just sipping and watching the rain. And it's just nice when you can just have a peaceful, slow morning. I used to have those all the time. And for the past, 6 months, I've been getting up at the crack of dawn and just rushing through my day. And it's been really hard to make time for these shows, to record these episodes, because I'm kind of useless at night to do something creative. I'm fine doing that other job till 9:45. I realized that I can do that job easily, but something like this, I want to be fresh. I want it to be the first thing I do in the morning. And so at least for the next 6 months while I have this schedule, I think I'm going to have a really good, I'm just going to feel really good. I'm going to be well rested. So I'm very, very excited about that. I also saw this really interesting thing on Instagram. There's this neuroscientist called by the name of Andrea Salvi. And she talked about how talking to yourself improves your mental health, like talking aloud to yourself. And I have to say that I 1000% agree with this in my own life. I've always been somebody that talks to myself. I've read different things throughout the years where, supposedly people that are very smart and have a high IQ do this. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but I do think that some of the ways that I have improved my mental health over the years is really talking out loud to myself and really just analyzing my emotions and talking through them, like just analyzing where they come from. Okay, why am I feeling anxious right now? What's the stem of that? Okay, it has to do with this. And okay, yes, I feel weird about that situation and maybe it was a little uncomfortable, but it's normal for people to feel that. And I'm probably over exaggerating it in my own brain. And again, just talking through different situations like that has been enormously helpful. And so when I saw that there was an Italian neuroscientist that had actually done research on this, I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. And truly, this podcast, I mean, my whole mental health segment, I started because early in this podcast, I was going through a very difficult mental health time. My company was going through a lot of trauma and just there was so much negative happening that I made it its own segment because it really was affecting my overall health. And so I've become very aware of how important mental health is. I think the world is very aware now of how important good mental health is, and that sometimes you just take a day off because you need to get a mental health break and just take some time for yourself. So this podcast for sure is a place where I feel like, I know I'm broadcasting this out to the public, but I kind of feel like I'm talking to myself here. That I think that's why I can easily do this show and talk straight through for over an hour on a consistent basis because it feels like I'm just talking out loud about things I like to talk about. And some of it is working through different things with mental health. So anyway, I don't know if you have ever tried this practice, but I will say that it has been an enormous help in my life. So glad to see there's some science behind it. Another thing that made me have a very good mental health week was Saturday. I ended up taking myself shopping to the Lululemon outlet. And I had a gift card that I had been saving because I don't know, I like to save a gift card for when I have a special occasion coming up. And so next week I'm going to be traveling, and this is maybe why I'm also in a good mood. I have a little vacation coming up. I'm going to be going and seeing my mom and my family in Maine and spending Thanksgiving with them. And we're celebrating my mom's 70th birthday. So I'm really excited about that next week. And with that, I was like, oh, I would love to find maybe a long sleeve sweater dress because I have this Lululemon sweater dress that I'm obsessed with. I wear it constantly. And Lululemon has some really pretty sweaters sometimes. I'm like, let me go try to find something warm and cozy and, put this gift card to good use. So, and the one here, I was contemplating saving this gift card for Kennebunkport because we're actually spending the holiday in Kennebunkport. And there's a really good Lululemon outlet in Kittery, Maine. But it's still like a good 45 minutes away from Kennebunkport, and I don't know if I'm gonna have the time to go there. And I was like, well, I had some time on Saturday and I felt like shopping. I have to be in the mood to go shopping. I'm one of those people that likes to just go buy a ton of stuff when I'm in the mood to try stuff on and really dig for good deals. And I usually buy a ton of stuff and then just use those, just have them in my closet and pull things out periodically when I want something new to wear. So So I drove to Glendale, which is a good 40 minutes away from me. Usually this outlet is not that good. I kind of manage my own expectations, and I always get a little disappointed when I make the drive to go because I'm like, ugh, sometimes I walk out with nothing and I'm like, okay, that was a good 2 hours out of my day. But I was like, no, I don't have anything better to do, and I feel like digging for some good deals. So I went and I was hoping for some dresses. I love a good monochromatic look. I love a one piece, so I love a dress. And especially if it's kind of like that athletic, comfortable, functional type of dress that Lululemon has, they're known to make things like that. I did see a couple dresses that I took back to the dressing room, but what I was super excited about is I found a bunch of shirts like this. So this is one of them. So this is a long sleeve collared shirt. You can see how much room I have in it. It's a medium, but it's meant to be very loose fitting and comfortable, and you can see kind of the drapiness of it. Oh, I love it. I love it. It's super warm. It's comfortable. It feels very drapey and like it's not going to wrinkle, which I love shirts that don't wrinkle. And I like a good business casual look for work. And so this is perfect because it's got a collar, so you kind of look a little bit dressy, but you're in Lululemon gear. So I'm going to pair this shirt today with some black jeans, some stretchy black jeans, and my Ugg boots, and I'll be super comfortable at the office in Lululemon, but also with a business casual look. So I got this color, I got a taupe with the same collar, and then I got this gorgeous, and it's also oversized. They had a medium. I totally could have gotten a small, but well, they didn't have a small in stock. And I'm like, okay, I actually really love an oversized look, especially for like a sweatshirt. So there's this, I got this hoodie. It's a hoodie, it has a hoodie, but it's also looks like a nice sweater. It's definitely a sweatshirt, but it's got like faux pockets, and it's a little bit structured, not super structured, but it's just plain black, and it's casual, but it can be dressed up. Love that. So I got that. And then I got this other long sleeve crop top, and it's actually a size 14. I usually wear a 6. 6 fits in Lululemon. Now, if I go to an 8, I have a little bit of room, which is nice for when I'm just on on my heavier side, and then I can fit into a 4 when I'm lost a little, when I'm on like the lighter weight side. But I'm not as like overly comfortable in a size 4. And I really liked, as I'm getting older, I like to have things like a little bit roomier. And I also want to give myself space to gain a little weight as I get a little older and to not feel just restricted in it. So I like a 6 to 8 now in Lululemon. I'll never buy a 4 again, but I have a lot of 4s in my closet. So I can still fit into them, but I prefer a 6 to 8. But it was kind of like a beige crop top shirt. And I have another similar one in a size 6, but I don't wear it as often because it is very fitted, which a lot of their clothing is. This size 14, it's beige and it's very loose. The sleeves are really long, and I love it. It's soft and it feels so nice on. So I'm super glad that I got that oversized. And then I got my favorite thing. Now this was normally $138, marked down to, guess how much? $39. $39. Unheard of, especially for like a long sleeve drapey, piece like this with a lot of fabric to it. So every single shirt that I got was $39, except for this one that I was hoping was $39. It ended up being $69, but it had been like $150 full price. So, or maybe it was $168, but it's this almost like, it's got like this sheen to it. It's this grayish taupey sweatshirt with it's got a zipper. Oh my God, it's so pretty. I'm obsessed. It's so soft and it feels so good on. I'm like, oh, I love it. So I ended up spending a little bit more than I wanted to, because I used the gift card and then I spent a little bit more, but I've got like 5 new things that are going to be nice and cozy for the cold season. And I'll probably wear some of them in Maine when I visit. So very, very excited about all of that. So, those are some good things going on this week for me. I love the holiday season. I know some people don't love the holidays. And even though this year is definitely a little bit of a more frugal, tighter year, I love the season. I love to be around family. I'm so excited to go see my sister and my brother and my stepfather and my mom and their little doggies. So it'll be really fun. Chad's coming with me. So I'm super, super excited. So I have lots of recapping to do of that trip. And I hope all of you have some exciting things going on for Thanksgiving. I hope, do you like that meal? That's like my favorite meal of the year. I'm so excited to eat that delicious meal. So good things coming up. And that is my mental health check-in of the week. I hope all of you have had a great mental health week yourselves. All right, let's get into a diet culture media moment. Now, there is a lot of talk about Amy Schumer, and so she clearly has been doing the GLP-1s. She's lost a ton of weight. She just went on her Instagram in this slinky, gorgeous fitted dress, looking like a snack. I mean, she looks incredible. She looks so good. I mean, Amy Schumer, back in the day, back when she used to go on Howard Stern, and he would be like, is Amy Schumer hot? I don't know. And it was always because she was a little bit overweight or what was considered societally overweight, even though she was always beautiful. But that would be the big joke. And she would joke about it herself. She was always very self-deprecating. But here's a question. Does Ozempic and do these weight loss drugs create a higher propensity for people to get divorced? Because now everyone's talking about how, now that she's in this slinky new body, how she's going to divorce her husband, and she deleted all of her fat pictures and all of the pictures with her husband. And People wrote an article about how they're going through a difficult time. And I think here's my analysis of the situation, okay? I think that Amy Schumer had a lot of difficult relationships with significant others. She dated Anthony Jeselnik. I think that she is someone who, and I think a lot of female comics struggle sometimes in the romantic area because they're up there, they're talking about their significant other a lot of times, and that can be very hard on a relationship. And I think that she was someone that did want to get married and have children and, do those traditional things. I think a lot of people want that, especially in my generation, right? 30s, 40s, 50s. I think our generation comes from that old school, you get married, you have the traditional wedding, and I just think that even though times are changing and less people are getting married these days, I think a lot of people do want to experience that at least once in their lives. And she ended up, forming a relationship with this chef who it came out later that he was on the spectrum. And she had realized that because of the way, like, she had fallen and hurt herself on a bike, and he had this very, very weird reaction, almost like this very cold, unfeeling reaction. And she had to recognize that part of it was because of his, his being on the spectrum, neurodivergence, maybe not always acting appropriately in a situation. And she accepted that of him. And I think she was very accepting because she did want that family unit. And I think she was open to overlooking some of those personality quirks because she did love him and care about him. And now, though, and again, you never know what happens behind closed doors. You never know how difficult a relationship is. But there have been many articles written about how people, once they go through weight loss surgery or once they have this big transformation and they're suddenly looking amazing, so much better than they used to look, maybe according to society standards, but arguably they're a much better looking version of themselves. They end up divorcing their significant other and being like, I deserve better. I deserve somebody that's now my equal, appearance wise. And is that what Amy Schumer is doing? Is she now like, okay, I'm like hot, I've lost all this weight, look at me, I'm this hot blonde and I'm going out on the town, I can get mine. Who knows? I mean, she certainly would not be the first person in a relationship like this who's had a dramatic weight loss to break up with their significant other. And then everyone was talking about, oh, why did she delete her fat pictures? Why did she delete her whole history? And so now she's like, I deleted my old pictures for no reason. Well, that's insane. Nobody just does that for no reason, right? And so now she's posting like some old school, very unattractive pictures. I think to the backlash, she's like, no, I still am self-deprecating. Look at me here. Fire emoji, fire emoji, fire emoji. And she's like all like in a hospital gown giving birth. So now she's like back to posting some of these self-deprecating things because I'm sure she's like, oh, people aren't going to just let this go and let me post hot pictures now. So who knows? But you know what, Amy Schumer, good for you. You look amazing. Again, I know we're not supposed to comment on celebrities' bodies, but hey, this is a safe space on this show that we do that. And Amy, you look great. And hey, everybody's entitled to do what they want to find their own happiness. So if getting a divorce and moving forward in her life as a single woman, now in a much thinner body, hey, more power to her. And that is my diet culture media moment of the week. All right, let's get into a longevity lifestyle. Now, I was reading People the other day, and there was an article on Brittnay Cartwright, who, I don't know if any of you watched Vanderpump Rules, but she was the girlfriend of this terrible guy named Jax, who ended up kind of like, Brittnay was this young girl that he brought on the show, sweet as pie, Southern girl, Southern drawl, very, very pretty. She was super, super tiny and flat chested when she was on the show. And then he ended up wanting her to get breast implants. Now, she may have wanted them as well, but I don't know if you remember this, but back in the day, and I don't know whether all doctors did this, but I remember hearing doctors would do this, that women would go in and say, oh, I want a C cup. And they're like, oh, we're going to give her a D cup anyway, just because we think that she's going to want these larger implants instead of the smaller ones when they wake up, and we'll just have to go back in. Well, supposedly that happened with Brittnay, and when she came out, like her boobs were so enormous. They just were way too big for her body. From the jump, like as soon as she got out, it was almost like it just didn't look quite right. But then she had a baby and then she gained a lot more weight and she never really lost the baby weight, and her boobs just like took over her entire like body. I mean, it was like, I mean, I think sometimes if you do have very, very large breasts, it does make you look just heavier, And I think a lot of women now are kind of downsizing, like Lauren Bostic did. And so she ended up going 10 days under the knife, and she ended up getting a mommy makeover. So her decision to go under the knife, there were comments made by her estranged husband, Jack. She's been trying to get a divorce from this loser forever. He made a comment that she looked like a tree trunk. But she says she did this for me. It was about my confidence. She said I was torn down in my last relationship and I had lost a lot of my confidence. So I really wanted to get my confidence back. She said, I thought this was a perfect timing. She's like, I think I deserved it. And I really wanted to do it for myself. She said, I couldn't be happier with my decision. She said, I really just did this as a confidence thing for me because I'm starting to feel so much better after everything I've been through and where I'm at now. And she said, I wanted to feel as good on the outside as I feel on the inside. And I thought that this was really important for my mental health. And so what exactly did she get done? So it started with an abdominal reconstruction to correct changes Cartwright's body experienced in the wake of her birth. She said, after having cruise, I gained a lot of weight. So I had a lot of stretch marks and I kind of had a shelf at the very bottom below my belly button that would just not go away. She said, even at my skinniest, I still had the stretch marks and I still had that shelf. And she said, because of this, she developed a condition where the vertical muscles in her abdomen separated. She said, my abs were separated. So at the top of my stomach, it was almost sticking out as far as my boobs were. She's like, I hated that. And so she had an abdominal reconstruction that corrected it. She said what they did is they went in and they basically pulled all of my skin back from my stomach and they completely put everything back in place like it was before. She's like, and I can already tell such difference. She said, I can look down and my stomach doesn't stick out like it used to. It's interesting to see like what pregnancy did to her body, because you could tell that pregnancy had changed her. Like some people seem to they pop right back to where they were. And other people really, like their whole entire body changes. I mean, even her nose looked like it changed. So other procedures included liposuction around her back, her sides, and stomach to help shape and get her body back to the way it was looking before she had a baby. And then she also had a tummy tuck. They took off a lot of the skin from underneath her belly button to right above the pelvic bone and all the way across. She said, it's crazy. All my stretch marks are gone and my stomach is completely flat. She said they moved my belly button up. And then finally, Cartwright had her implants of 10 years removed and replaced with a smaller size. Thank God. Breast tissue was removed and her breast lifted too, in order to achieve the look that Cartwright desired. She said, my boobs are perky, they're beautiful. She said, I'm so, so, so happy. She said, noting that her breasts had gotten to a size F or E. She said, my boobs got humongous. She said, I was so uncomfortable. After having cruise and breastfeeding and then my weight fluctuating, she said they got so big and they would not go down to the size they were when I first got them done. She's like, I'm not sure exactly what size I'll be. I'll still be swollen for a while. She's like, I still wanted to have boobs. She's like, but I wanted more of like a full C to a small D. She said, but it's a huge difference and they look amazing. So good for her. She said her recovery was not easy, especially in the first 3 or 4 days. She said it was absolutely terrible. She couldn't get out of bed. She said I had to have somebody staying with me 24/7. I would call them from the guest room. She said they had to lift me out of bed so I could go to the bathroom. I did not leave my upstairs bedroom for the entire first week. So that's the only thing with surgery. Like I do want to have a blepher, an upper bleph at some point. And I'm like, ugh, the downtime though. She said all of it was worth it though. She said the pain is temporary, but the surgery is life-changing. She said I 100% think it's worth it. And she said she would do it again. She said it's such a drastic change. She said she cried so much, happy tears when she saw the results. She's like, it was all happy tears. They took off the stomach wraps and showed me my boobs. And she's like, I can't wait for the stitches and stuff to be gone. And she's like, after that, I'm going to go do some laser treatments. And so, yeah, she's living her best life. She said a lot of people on the internet are like, oh, you took the easy way out. You could have worked out. You could have done this. She said, yeah, but whenever I worked out and lose weight, she's like, I still look a lot smaller, but I still had that condition with my stomach. She's like, I still had stretch marks. She's like, I still had that shelf. She's like, no matter what I did, she's like, that stuff would not change. So, and that's the thing is we live in a world now where plastic surgery has become more and more acceptable. I certainly talk about a lot of the Botox and the fillers and all of this, anti-aging stuff, even though you're not supposed to talk about that anymore. And I just think I totally admire and respect women that don't do anything, that just age naturally and that, don't spend that money or take that time. What I don't like is when those people tear down other people that do choose to do those things. Because I think, to each her own, to each his own. Do what makes you happy. Do what is going to give you confidence, or or not. Right? Just do what makes you happy. And I think that, especially when you're in the public eye, it is hard to look at yourself if you're not happy with yourself. So I'm super happy for her. And I can't wait to see the final look because she's going to look great. So she's now on a show called The Valley. And that is going to be a really good episode because they finally kicked this loser Jax off, who domestic violence, like you name it, loser. Anyway, that is my longevity lifestyle segment of the week. I hope all of you are enjoying this segment this week a lot. All right, let's get into a foodie fail. Now, trigger warning, this is the most disgusting story I think I've ever heard. Okay, so I'm going to share it. I heard it on the Taylor Strecker show and it was behind a paywall. So you're welcome. For those of you that want to listen to this story, if you are easily disgusted, you might want to skip this segment. Okay. Before I tell this story, let me just talk about the topic of chicken wings for a moment. Okay. Now, do you like chicken wings? I personally am someone that never ever orders chicken wings. I can remember maybe 3 times that I've ordered chicken wings. Now, I love a good buffalo sauce. I like a boneless buffalo wing, which is essentially just a chicken tender in buffalo sauce, right? That's what I like because I do not like the bones, and I also don't like fat. I don't like animal gristly fat. Like I don't like the texture of it. I don't like that rubberiness. I don't like the soft feeling when I'm chewing animal fat along with meat in my mouth. I hate it. I don't think it tastes good. No. Now, I have ordered chicken wings one time where there was almost no fat on them. And they were these little tiny ones that had been fried to a crisp. And so, those were probably the best ones I've ever had. But when I'm eating it, like, this is why I like a filet mignon, right? I don't like a New York strip where you have all this fat that you have to cut off. I've talked about this before. My dad used to eat my steak fat. He loved that like gristle on the side of a steak. For me, no bueno. Do not like it. No. So, if I'm eating a chicken wing, literally I'll eat that. There's that little bumpy piece that's the meat, really the majority of the meat. So I'll bite that little piece of meat, and then I'm pretty much done with it. So almost the whole chicken wing is still left with all that skin. Like, I don't eat skin. I don't like, again, unless it's like fried to a crisp and I can't tell, there's no softness or chewiness or rubberiness. That's the only time I can eat fat. Like, if I'm eating bacon, it has to be almost burnt. I don't like a rubbery, fatty piece of bacon. Okay, so that's why it's kind of a waste. I don't really eat the whole chicken wing. I'll just eat like a little tiny piece of the pure meat. And then again, it's just a waste of money. It's a waste of meat. So, now my dad, my Nana, used to literally take a drumstick, for example. She would suck it dry. I mean, my dad, nothing left on that bone. Now, that is, again, like, I think that that's the best way to eat that piece of meat, because you're not wasting anything. You're eating the entire thing. A lot of people like the taste of that fat, and to each his own. Okay. When I used to see my Nana eat it, I'm like, you go, girl. More power to you. That's not for me. And they used to go crazy when they'd see how much they hated that I was wasting all this good meat. Now to the story. Okay, so there was a comedian, I won't say who, but there was a comedian that was on the Taylor Strucker show. And this was the most disgusting story thing he had ever seen. Okay, so him and his buddies are at this bar. And they're all ordering wings, and they're all eating their wings and throwing them in the bucket. And then this guy had started dating this woman. He's now married to her. Okay. She comes out, she meets up with them. She sits down with them. She's like, "Oh, what are you doing with the bones?" She proceeds to take other guys' bones and suck the meat and fat, any gristle left off an already chewed chicken wing. Ugh. Disgusting. Can you imagine taking someone else's trash, essentially, someone else's chicken wing, where they've taken their dirty fingers and they have already like worked their mouth and their gums and their saliva all over that chicken wing. They put the rest in that bucket, and then she takes that chicken wing and just sucks it dry. I mean, when I heard this story, I was like, disgusting, disgusting for so many reasons. I mean, and this guy married her. Now, maybe she, because of that, maybe she's a freak in the bedroom. Maybe she has no boundaries or barriers. And hey, you got to be a special person and have, I don't know who finishes somebody else's chicken wing. I mean, unless it's like your child, or, I mean, I think, maybe my Nana or maybe my dad, a family member, maybe they did finish one of my drumsticks one day. But to go out in public and you're going out with a bunch of guys and to chew their chicken wings. Anyway, that story stopped me in my tracks, made me want to throw up, and I had to share it, of course, on the Diet Obsessed podcast, because these are the types of things we are interested in this show, right? So anyway, hopefully if you sat through that story, feel free to share any other disgusting stories that you have, food related stories. I do like hearing these things and sharing them on this show. So anyway, that is my foodie fail trigger warning of the week. I hope all of you don't experience a foodie fail like this week. All right, let's get into my healthy habits segment. So this week and last week have been pretty good as far as healthy habits. I've been working out a lot more, especially now that I have all this time. I'm like, I can easily get my workout in every single day. So before I tape this show, I did my little strength training 20-minute workout and got it done yesterday before work. So it's just nice to have a lot of time to get everything in that I need to do. I did try this new workout. I didn't know what the name of this piece of equipment was, but it's actually, I realized this week it's called a landmine. So it's this bar that has a stationary point attached some way to the ground. There are these special landmine attachments where you can slide the bar in, but I like the dimensions. I like the angles that this gives you to do squats, to do shoulder presses, to do some core moves. So I built that into one of my clients' session workouts this week, and it was such a good workout. I did it myself, and I was like, yes, I'm so happy. I realized that I didn't realize that this attachment was at the gym that I train at until I saw the owner using it. I'm like, oh, I was hoping that you had one of these. I didn't even realize it. So that's been good. And then I did get, so I think I did talk about it on maybe a recent episode, but I bought some walnuts and some Brazil nuts at Trader Joe's because I want to try to lower my LDL with the Brazil nuts. I still have not had my first serving of those, but I will. And I did also buy some walnuts because walnuts are supposed to be the healthiest nut that exists. Walnuts are great for gut health. They have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, and sometimes it can be hard to find sources of omega-3 fatty acids if you don't eat a lot of fish, which I don't eat a ton of fish. I do eat salmon, but not often. So, but they have a lot of antioxidants, polyphenols. They do help to lower cholesterol and inflammation. And they do improve cognition. So they're really good for brain function. And so I've been reading about all the benefits and have been wanting to incorporate more walnuts into my diet. But I'm like, I don't know. In my brain, I'm like, I don't like walnuts. I don't like walnuts. And I think it's because I never really like them in a baked good, because that's usually where they appear. They're in a cookie, they're in a muffin, and I hate them in a baked good. That usually when I'm eating a baked good, I'm indulging, right? And I don't want, I don't know, I don't like the texture of that nut within a muffin, for example, or like something like a bread that I'm eating. However, what I did realize is they're really good. So what I did is I froze the whole bag, and then I took a quarter of a quarter cup out, and I chopped them up, and I put them over some vanilla Greek yogurt, and then I chopped up some strawberries, and oh my God, they were so good. It was like a parfait, and I think freezing them gave them that extra crunchy texture that I love, and they were very mild. I usually use almonds, but I think I actually really prefer the walnuts. So I'm very excited that I found that way to use them. And then the other way I've been using them is I bought that Thai chili soup from Trader Joe's. It's like a Thai curry based soup. It has a little bit of chicken, it has some vegetables, it's coconut milk based, and it's got really good spice in it. I love Thai soup, and this is delicious. So I've been taking it, and what I did the other day, because I put it in my bag to take to work for a quick, healthy, easy lunch. And I brought some pea pods. And then what I ended up doing is bringing some walnuts. And each bite of soup, I would put a little walnut in it and eat the walnut with the soup. And it really gave it a nice crunch. I mean, you could only really taste the Thai soup, but gave it extra protein, extra nutrients, extra fiber. And I got to tell you, eating that lunch where I'm eating this Thai soup with all these vegetables and protein and putting some walnut in it and eating my little pea pod on the side, I felt so healthy. I have to say, it was such a light but also satisfying meal. And it's a good balance for later at night when I want to have some indulgence or I want a little treat at the end of the day. If I've eaten really well early that day with my superfood smoothie and a very light soup for lunch, it's just a nice way to balance some indulging later on in the day. And you end that day feeling really good because you've had a lot of nutrients, but also a lot of delicious things that kept you satisfied, at least for me. So those were my healthy habits of the week. I hope all of you have had some great healthy habits this week yourselves. All right, let's get into my tasty treats. So this week, now I had given Chad a gift card for his birthday to this Italian place we love called Andreoli's. It's right down the street. I've talked about this place before. This is the place where they have that bastardo sandwich that I've replicated many times with the pecorino cheese and the Milano salami and the olive tapenade. So I did get one of those sandwiches, but I really wanted to try some new things. And we usually get, let's see, for pasta there, we usually get the gnocchi, and we've gotten this sausage and broccoli pasta dish. Well, this time I wanted to try something different. So I ended up getting the veal penne, and it had a veal bolognese, and that was delicious. I know veal can be very controversial with some people, but I do like the taste of veal, and this was a really delicious sauce. So that was then and the thing that I love about this Italian place is that it, just like Sophia's, when you get the pasta home, it hasn't overcooked, even though it was sealed to go. And I made sure to open the container a little bit to release some of that steam, because that is the worst. When you get pasta to go and you get it home and it's all soggy because it's just been like steaming in that container. So anyway, that was delicious. And then I got the rigatoni with sausage and peas. I had never tried that before. That was also a light tomato sauce. That was delicious. I actually will probably eat the rest of that before I head to work in a little bit. And then I did get a cannoli. The cannoli was delicious. Had a little bit of lemon zest, really good ricotta filling. And then I got this fogliatella, which is a pastry with a custard and ricotta filling. Also had a little bit of lemon taste. Very, very not intense, like not a lot of sugar. It was a very light dessert, I would say. But really good. Very, very crispy pastry exterior, but excellent. And then I did go out to brunch with a girlfriend, and had a delicious brunch. So got some mimosas with OJ, and then I ordered this chorizo burrito. Delicious. They made homemade chorizo at this restaurant, and oh my God, it was so good. Now they did serve a side of potatoes that weren't the best. It was supposed to come with French fries, and then they brought it as if they weren't going to give me any potatoes, and I'm like, this comes with French fries, right? Because it just had like this little side of fruit. Now, did I need the potatoes? Probably not, but it said it came with potatoes, and I'm like, if I'm ordering potatoes, I'm supposed to get potatoes, I'm paying for potatoes, give me the potatoes. So they ended up not bringing French fries, but they brought like breakfast potatoes, and they were okay. So anyway, I ate half of it, had my mimosas, and yeah, got a little nice buzz and delicious brunch. Caught up with a friend I hadn't seen in a while, so that was really fun. And after that, I realized I needed something sweet for later, so I stopped at the dollar store and I got some Twix, some mini Twix. I got some Haribo candy. I got those little red raspberries and blackberries that I love. And then I also got some strawberry like Sour Patch strawberries. So good. So that hit the sweet tooth on Sunday, and finished my Italian food on Sunday and did my little indulging. And yeah, those were my tasty treats of the week. I hope all of you have had some delicious, tasty treats this week yourselves. All right, let's get into my podcast review. Now, this week, there was a very interesting episode on burnt toast. And burnt toast is by host Virginia Smith, who talks a lot about diet culture and the patriarchy and feminism. And she had on this woman by the name of Kaila Yu. And the topic was beauty is a depreciating currency. And the image of this Kaila Yu was this, beautiful Asian woman, and very, societally beautiful, right? And I was interested in hearing, Virginia Smith is very much a feminist, and has bucked a lot of the expectations put on women in this society, even though she used to fall into those roles. And she was someone she's a writer, she's very intelligent, and she used to write about like teaching women how to be in a smaller body, teaching women how to lose weight, teaching women how to like please their man. And so she understands that we all have played a part in these societal roles because of media and because of what's accepted. And I was really interested because, Virginia is someone, and she talks about it at the end of the show, someone who's let go of trying to like be in a smaller body and fit these stereotypical, societally beautiful versions of what a woman is expected to be. And so I wanted to hear how Virginia talked with this woman who clearly, falls into some of these and maintains some of these practices to be beautiful in this world, right? The expectations, right? The staying thin, or the Botox, or surgery. So they talk about all of this, which I thought was a really interesting conversation. The other interesting thing is, and I don't know whether I'm like falling into this algorithm of diet culture in Asia, but I've talked about it on, I think it was the last show I talked about it, and now I'm talking about it again. So I don't know whether it's in the zeitgeist or what, but anyway, so this woman, Kaya, is an author. She's based in Los Angeles. she wrote a book. That's Virginia is very like Ryan Holiday in that she has authors on her show, and she has a bookstore where she sells books. And so this woman wrote a book called Fetishized, A Reckoning with Yellow Fever, Feminism and Beauty. And that came out earlier this fall, and it received rave reviews in the New York Times. Kaya is a luxury travel and culture writer. And so this book was all about her grappling with her experience growing up Asian and female in a world that has so many stereotypes and expectations about both of these things. And so they talked about the pressure to perform so many different kinds of specific beauty labor. I like how they call that beauty labor. The experience of being objectified sexually, and then they get into how, you know, we all navigate the dual reality of hating beauty standards and often feeling safer and happier complying with them. That line right there, how we all navigate the dual reality of hating beauty standards and often feeling safer and happier complying with them. And I think that's where I analyze all of these things and am fascinated by these types of topics, right? Because I've talked about myself how I appreciate the fat phobic movement or the body positivity movement, even though I am somebody who does work hard to maintain my weight, and how I appreciate how it's becoming aware of the patriarchy, and how, you know, all of these expectations are put on women, and how, you know, we're striving to be looked at in many different ways and respected for more than our beauty. But at the same time, I am trying to stay young looking and do the Botox. So it is this interesting, it is an interesting world to navigate, both hating these standards we're expected to comply with and feeling better complying with them, right? Enjoying the privilege that comes from these things, while also understanding the negativity associated with it, and how some people face a lot of difficulties in this world because they can't physically comply with them in certain ways. So anyway, it's an interesting topic, which is why I wanted to do an episode on this. And so it started out with Kaya talking about weight standards and beauty standards in Asia, how she talked about, well, let me start with this. So Virginia talked about a quote within her memoir, that the fastest way to empowerment, okay, let me start over. The fastest way to empowerment was to chase the white man's gaze. That is something that Kaya had realized. And Virginia wanted to talk about, at the beginning of this episode, how so often beauty work, the work we put into being beautiful, beauty labor. I've never heard it called this before, but it's really true, right? So often beauty work is a logical survival strategy for us. And that is so poignant, because obviously we live in a world today where women are educated, women are gaining in power and gaining financially and have independence. But back in the day, if you were a woman that didn't get married, you might end up on the streets. Beauty was, or you know, trying to get married and attracting a man was survival in this world, right? Women weren't allowed to have a bank account. Women weren't allowed to vote. Women weren't allowed to own land. I mean, all these things, right? So anyway, when we have this natural inclination to want to be beautiful, to want to be perceived as beautiful, it does come from a history of survival. Let's not forget that, right? So Kaya talked about how, you know, we're told at a young age that women are praised for their beauty, and even though it's something we don't have control over, in some ways, of course, but in a lot of ways we don't have control over it. And it's a depreciating currency, according to the patriarchy. It shouldn't be viewed that way. She said, but according to the patriarchy, it is. Women lose currency as they get older. And Virginia wanted her to talk about, can you talk about how in the book you internalize these messages pretty young? And Kaya's like, well, I think they were taught to us in Disney movies, right? She's like, look at Little Mermaid. She's like, the little princess, this beautiful princess is supposed to end up with a prince, and that's all that matters. And Virginia's like, yeah, and it doesn't matter that she had to give up her family, her culture, her body, her entire world. And Kaya talked about how, falling in love without ever speaking a word to each other, just by the way that they looked. She said, when I grew up, she said there were so few representations of Asian women. And mostly the representations were prostitutes or massage girls on the side, not even really speaking or having speaking roles in movies, really until Lucy Liu came out on the scene. And Virginia, it's funny that she brings this up because just the other day I was looking for a movie to fall asleep to, and I saw, Memoirs of a Geisha. I haven't seen that in a while, and I put that on. And I hadn't seen it in a while, and I'm like, are geishas prostitutes? And then it goes on in the movie to talk about how, geishas are really thought of as works of art, but essentially they were in essence, they were in a way, they were sex workers in a way, because they did sell their virginity, right? But Virginia did say, she's like, you do a really good deep dive into Memoirs of a Geisha. And she said, I didn't even realize that this was written by a white man. And Kaya's like, yeah, no one knows this. I didn't know this, right? She's like, Kaya's like, no one knows this. She's like, and it's basically about childhood prostitution. And you see in, the more beautiful girl gets to go be a geisha, where she is more respected. She is mainly dancing. The stuff that she has to do is more just like flirting and like letting them see the wrist. Whereas her sister, who's not as attractive, gets sent to the pleasure district. And it's very dark. It's very, very dark. And how, she turns 15, suddenly her best commodity or her most valuable commodity is selling her virginity to the highest bidder. And that's getting the most money for your virginity is considered this honor. It's very problematic if you go back and watch this movie. And Virginia's like, well, but in some ways, you were happy to be represented, right? And Kaya's like, yeah, Margaret Cho said it really well when she joked about, trying to be that prostitute in a war, get that movie role where you're like being the prostitute just to work, right? Just to get a job in Hollywood. And Virginia then asked about, you talk about Asia Files in one of your books. Can you explain what that is? And Kaya said it's an obscure term, not often used. It's basically a man with an Asian fetish. She said, and I do want to say that most men that are dating Asian women do not have an Asian fetish. She said it's more, a vocal minority. They treat Asian women as disposable and replaceable. When she was talking about this, the first person that popped into my brain was that Charlie Adelson guy. Remember how I talked about Donna and Charlie Adelson, who had murdered the husband of their sister because they wanted to be closer to the children? Well, he was an Asia fetish guy. He only exclusively dated Asian women. He had multiple women at the same time, did not respect them, would pit them against each other and make them feel jealous. And just the way that this guy is depicted, and you can see it, disgusting, like disgusting. And I know what she's talking about, because Charlie Adelson definitely falls into this category of having that Asian fetish. But I do have a friend, or I mean, more of an acquaintance. I used to hang out with him quite a bit back in the day when I lived in Los Angeles. And he exclusively dated Asian women. But it wasn't, to me anyway, it didn't feel like a fetish. It was more just that was his type. He just found Asian women beautiful, and he was always extremely respectful. Um, just always had monogamous, loving, caring relationships, and is now married with a child to a beautiful Asian woman. And I don't think that he has an Asian fetish. I really do just think that that's his type. Just like a lot of people have, like brunettes or like blondes or like redheads. I do think that sometimes people just find, whether you find black people attractive, or whether think Asian people are attractive, or, I typically don't go after blondes. I typically would go after a darker type of guy. But anyway, some people have a type, and then some people have a fetish. And I think Charlie Adelson was a piece of shit that had a fetish. And I think my friend is not that type. So anyway, there's a distinction. And then Virginia brought up the fact that, Kaya had talked about how this fetish, or these thoughts of these roles that Asian women fall into, is very rooted in U.S. occupation and colonialism. And Kaya's like, yeah, I don't think people understand the deep history of that. When white men first met Asian women, it was spreading Christianity or American occupation. She said a lot of these young, impressionable men were sent, after the Korean War, a lot of these young men that were sent to war were sent to Thailand, to enjoy the beaches, but also there was specific prostitution rings set up for the benefit of those men. And it was kind of like a reward for them. And so they walked away with all of these preconceived notions of Asian women and that they're prostitutes, right? And so she said that's hugely problematic, and why, part of why, and the history of why these stereotypes exist. And Virginia said not a lot of people know this or understand that this was the first way that white men interacted with Asian women. And Kaya's like, yes, Thailand is still known for sex tourism. She said it's all from that specific time period. And Virginia said that, so you have the Asiaphile issue, the geisha representation of women, and then there's this other stereotype of the A student, very cold, very, tire mom, overachiever. And she said that is also a very problematic and narrow stereotype. But, these are your options, it seems like, as a representation of Asian people in our society. And Kaya's like, I kind of fell into that stereotype. She's like, a lot of Asian parents immigrated here. They wanted to give their child a better life, and they put a lot of pressure on them. She said they were very strict. They expect excellence, obedience. I was personally very shy and studious. She said, and then she said, then there was like the nerdy revenge of the nerds type. And I did not want to be in that stereotype, so I rebelled against that stereotype. And so Virginia's like, so let's talk about where you went to rebel against that stereotype. And so Kaya said that she didn't have a lot of role models. She said, I did find an Asian model online that I became obsessed with. She was gorgeous. She was actually a Playboy model, so very, highly sexualized. And I finally felt like I had someone I could aspire to be like. So she seemed like she had everything I didn't. And so she said, then when I went to college, I started to pursue pinup modeling, and that led to import modeling, which is a very niche Asian car show. Like it's like where you're modeling in front of the cars, and it's kind of what inspired Fast and the Furious movies. And so, and Virginia was asked, and was there any part of that that was fun and enjoyable, or was it always a feeling of like trying to play a role? And Kaya said, well, I first explain it like it felt like love. She said, I couldn't explain it, but I had such a lack of self love that when I look back at things, that intention, if you feel invisible your whole life, and then suddenly you're getting this attention because of how you look. She said it's very validating. She said, but it's a very temporary hit. She said, and then of course all these other girls are coming up behind you, and with the competition, it's very fleeting. And and so Virginia said, okay, so you became increasingly aware of what you needed to do to your own body to compete with these other women. And Kaya said, before I even went after pinup modeling, she said, I got breast implants, which is still very popular, obviously. But this was the whole beach Baywatch era where Pamela Anderson was the ideal body type for women. She said, I was completely flat chested and did not feel feminine at all. She said, the complicated thing is I don't regret the breast implants. She said, I really like them. She said, but I also wish that we didn't live in a society where we felt like we had to get them to feel better about ourselves. And Virginia said, right, it could be something that you did on your own terms, versus feeling like you had to do it because you were lacking something that you needed to have to feel accepted. And Kaya said, in the book, I talk about something that's very timely because I'm not sure if you watched the last version of Love Island, but, and of course, Virginia had not. But she said Sierra Ortega, who was very popular on the show, she ended up getting kicked off because she made some comments about her eyes. She called them the C word. And she said that she looked too Asian. So she said she was going to get them Botox so they're wider. And she's like, I think what happened when that came out is a lot of people didn't know that that's considered a slur. But it is, especially the way she was using it. So she ended up getting kicked off the show. And I think it's important for people to know that Asians do consider that a slur. She said, but I myself did get that surgery. She said it's called a double eye surgery, which is probably the most popular surgery amongst Asians. She said a lot of East Asians get it. She said it was very popularized during in South Korea by a white doctor who was trying to make prostitutes and military wives more attractive for their white husbands back in the Korean War. And she said in medical journals, this doctor would describe the Asian eye as dull and listless and unemotional. And I think most Asian girls, I wasn't trying to get my eyes done to look more white. She said, but in Asia, bigger eyes are considered more attractive. But the surgery comes from somebody who made racist comments about Asian people's eyes, so it's also very complicated. And Virginia sarcastically says, another gift from the white man. Wonderful. She's like, they've done so much for us. She said, it's great to see. She said, but I had Elise Hugh on the podcast when Flawless came out, which was about the Korean beauty industry. It was fascinating. She said, it was very interesting for me to learn that some of these procedures, like the eye procedure, come from racist, misogynistic origins, like this white doctor, but also other parts of culture. It's not about seeking wellness. Sometimes it's just a long held beauty standard in a culture. And I just think that push pull is very interesting, where these standards come from. And Kaya said, but but is the beauty standard is it the Western? She's basically contemplating whether it is a Western beauty standard to have bigger eyes. That, is that the origin of where it became a beauty standard for Asian culture, right? And Virginia said, I think what your book explores is the origin stories of these standards that we lose touch with. But the standard feels so important to achieve regardless. And she said, when with beauty standards, we get normalized to say, oh, this body part needs to look a certain way, and we don't really unpack it and think about, the why. And do these have racist, problematic backgrounds? Um, and Kaya said, I mean, look at these body types that have been upheld, right, in our society. She's like Paris Hilton and then Kim Kardashian. She said, none of these body types are very achievable, right? And Virginia said, then Virginia brought up, thinking about bodies, I wanted to ask you about anti-fatness, which is one of the beauty biases we talk a lot about on this show. Um, you know, uh, uh, just kind of about the intersecting of anti-fatness, beauty bias, and upholding anti-Asian racism. I think the Asiaphile piece of it. But she's basically asking, did you feel pressure to not be fat in your culture? And Kaya said it's always a joke that when you go back to your family of origin, they always joke that, oh, you've gained weight. And they always say that to criticize you. But when I was 25, she said I was even thinner than I am now. She said I was very skinny. She said, and I got hired to do a movie in Beijing. And when I got there, she said the skinny standard was scary. She said I showed up and I met the director, and I could tell he was disappointed because he thought that I was bigger than he thought I was. And the next day I actually got fired because he told my agent that I was too heavy. So she said, yeah, the weight standards and the beauty standards in Asia are scary. She said, I would not want to be a woman in East Asia. She said, it's almost worse than in America, in my opinion. And Virginia asked, do you think the pressure you felt to get your eye surgery and the breast implants, was managing your weight something that you also felt pressured to do? And she said, I mean, that was always a concern with East Asian expectation. She said, but I will be very transparent that when I was doing a lot of that modeling, she said I was doing a lot of cocaine at the time. And so she said it was less of an issue because doing cocaine is a symptom of not there, like the symptom of doing that is not eating. So she's like, I didn't necessarily struggle with that. Uh, and then Virginia's like, well, all right, well, that's this whole other piece. She said, because you did write about addiction as well. And I appreciated that because it makes sense that when you're struggling with all these messages that you receive from the industry and all the pressure, it just seems like a perfect storm for addiction. And Kaya said, when I was using drugs and alcohol, it felt like a form of love. She said a lot of people do talk about how the first time they do ecstasy, it feels like love. But I think for someone who is so lacking in it, it was deeply fulfilling for me, and maybe more than how most people feel. And Virginia asked about her relationships with other women. She said, I would imagine that it was very cutthroat. Did you feel that competition with Asian women, especially with there being so few opportunities for Asian women at that time? And and Kaya said, I think it was well portrayed in Memoirs of a Geisha. A young girl comes into the industry and gets taken down by the older geisha. And from the moment this younger girl enters the scene, the older women are threatened. She said, but I've also always been a girl's girl. So that did help because I did have a good group of friends that did help me stay a little bit more grounded with my relationships with other women. And Virginia's like, well, in the patriarchy, if women are pitted against each other, then we're distracted by that, and men naturally have more power and control. She's like, in Memoirs of a Geisha, it portrayed women competing against each other and pitted against each other. And that's replicated in a lot of industries, more than the geisha world. Um, so it again, it perpetuates this representation of Asian women and women, women's cattiness in general. And and Kaya talked about how you see the same thing in media, like when Britney Spears was pitted against Christina Aguilera. She's like, I don't think that they were enemies, but I don't know, maybe they became that way because of the media representation. And Virginia talked about how women are cast into these roles, and then the way to keep the power is to do what's necessary to keep playing those roles. And it's this perfect storm and a self-fulfilling prophecy in that respect. And Virginia asked, what made you finally say, I'm say, okay, I'm participating in this whole system that's harmful to me and it doesn't align with my values. And Kaya said, I mean, I don't think I had any clarity about that until maybe 10 or 15 years ago when I got sober. I'd quit modeling. I had started a musician career. I did have a little bit of success, but ultimately we weren't really making any money. And I was in my 30s and I'm like, okay, I need to start a real career. And I got sober and I started going to a therapist. And that's when I could really even look at anything with the drugs and alcohol, because it just made it hazy, and it's easy to rationalize anything away when you're doing a lot of drugs and using alcohol to kind of not see clearly. And she said, I've been through a lot of therapy. It's much easier being sober and having a support system, dealing with the trauma. That's really what everybody needs to do to heal. And Virginia says, you talk about when you were complicit in a lot of your writing, which I respect. She said, that you were pushing members of your band to be sexier than they wanted to be. And I think back to the days where I wrote diet stories and taught women to try to be thin. Sometimes it's hard to look back at how we participated in these toxic systems. And Kaya's like, yeah, I guess when you're swimming in water, it's hard to see it when you're in it, but when you look back and reflect, you can really see it. And now we're going back and apologizing to all these women from the early 2000s, that like Monica Lewinsky and all these women we tore apart and analyzed and tore everything that they were doing apart, because it was very much based in the patriarchy and in these stereotypes that were expected of women. And Virginia asked, how has this changed your relationship with beauty and beauty work now? You talked about the complicated feelings you had about your breast implants, and I'm curious if you still feel like you have to opt in to this world. And she kind of said, I think writing the book was one of the most healing things. It definitely helped. It was an unexpected outcome. She's like, but I still dye my hair. I still like to look pretty. I think it's no longer as male centered. I'm certainly not dressing like I used to do. And maybe that's because I'm older. I'm certainly not dressing like I did in my 20s. But I would love to aspire to be where Pamela Anderson is right now, where she's like, okay, I'm going to show up with no makeup on the red carpet. And everyone's like, this is amazing. And if more people buck these beauty standards, then maybe we'll make natural looking more normalized. And Virginia's like, it is an interesting arc. She's like, why are you even talking about this? It's my face. But it's the male comments that are always interesting to me. Some of the men that write in will be like, I feel personally let down, and oh, it was all fake. She was fake. She was never beautiful. And it's like, no, this is what she really looks like. She wasn't lying to us for all these years. And it's just interesting because men are allowed to become these silver foxes, and Meanwhile, women have to do all these different things to try to not look our age. And and Kaya says it just shows how media representation is important. She's saying back in the day, Asian men were not considered attractive, but now that K-pop is popular, a lot of Asian men are considered sexy now. And Virginia's like, yeah, and I still dye my hair. And, every time I do, I have this internal battle. I'm thinking I should just let the grays out. And then I'm like, oh, but I'm not ready to. And I still like to look pretty too. I mean, I do feel like sometimes I do participate in this patriarchal behavior, like, and labor. Like if I put lipstick on, I'm like, okay, I don't have to overanalyze this. It's okay that I'm wearing lipstick, and I sometimes like to wear lipstick, but I think, knowing that you can release yourself from a standard is very freeing. I've personally let myself let go of trying to be thin. And it's a better way to live. She said, I accept my body the way it is. I'm never going to be thin again without some sort of dramatic intervention. And I've accepted that. And Kaya said, I think it's troubling that a lot of this body positivity is suddenly becoming lost in the thin craze with those Ozempic craze. And Virginia's like, yeah, I mean, it's hard to exist in a fat body in this world. We talk about that a lot on this show. Everyone's allowed to make their own choices about their bodies. It's just sad, I think, that we're losing fat representation and we're just seeing all these homogenized bodies. And so I just thought that was an interesting point to stop at. Because I was curious overall with how Virginia would handle someone that still does participate. Because you could just looking at the cover of this podcast episode, you can see Kaya with this long blonde hair that's got to be extensions. And you can see that she puts makeup on and again, looks traditionally beautiful. And I was curious how the conversation between Virginia and between Kaya. And I like that Virginia brought up her own, things that she still does for her own beauty, right? She still dyes her hair. She still puts on lipstick occasionally and likes doing that for herself because she feels that's what she wants to do. She doesn't feel like she has to for her husband. She doesn't feel like she has to please anyone else, but it's something that she likes to do. It's like, when I suddenly had the realization, like I had that controlling ex where I'm like, oh, I have to stay thin for him. And I was so like, he's controlling and this and that. But I'm like, no, what I actually did finally realize is that some of this stuff I'm doing for me because I feel good doing it, maintaining my weight, feeling strong, putting some makeup on, straightening my hair. And again, is it because I like to fit in this societally approved beauty standard and I have more privilege as I move through the world because of that? Maybe. I'm sure some of that does come into play. I've also, as I've gotten older, there are a lot of times where I go out with absolutely no makeup on. And I feel much more confident in myself doing that. Would I have done that in my 20s? Probably not. So, but I do think it's an interesting conversation, like where our own boundaries are with what we will do. Like people have made comments on this show, like, she talks too much about Botox, like, and hate the fact that I talk about that. And I'm like, guess what? Tune out. If you don't want to do it, no problem. I'm talking about my personal journey, and the people that do like to hear about it can tune in and hear me talk about what I like to do. So I just think we should all let each other do what makes us happy. I like to analyze it all on this show, and hopefully you enjoy it. That's probably why you're tuning in. So anyway, what do you think about this conversation? What do you do for your own beauty And why do you do it? Do you think you do it for yourself? Do you think you do it for society? Do you do it for a partner? What did this conversation bring up for you? Feel free to DM me. Feel free to leave a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. It really, really helps the show. If you are listening to this show and you are enjoying this conversation, you will love the Craving More premium episodes. So you can subscribe through Patreon. You can subscribe through anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And until we meet again, I hope all of you have a very balanced week and a happy Thanksgiving next week.